Good morning to our listeners here on Long Island. It's a pleasure to welcome you to another episode of Suffolk Matters, where Suffolk County meets Suffolk AME. Okay, so this morning our guest is Chris Weiner. He's Unit President of AME Family Service Unit. Chris, good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you could make it in today. Let's talk, I guess, initially, what is the Family Services Unit?
Family Services Unit. We're comprised of a few branches. We have Child Protective Services, which investigates any maltreatment, neglect, abuse cases. We have foster care, the foster care unit that supervises the foster homes and the children that are in the homes. Then we have Child Protective and Preventive Services that deal with cases where families may come to us where they're in need and they are asking for a voluntary service. We'll provide them that. Or we have families that we're monitoring through where they have a court mandate.
Okay, so just in general, I guess that whole umbrella fits over anything family related where the government would maybe need to step in and get involved in some way. Sometimes because there's something bad going on, and sometimes because some help is needed.
Yes, that is true.
Let's talk about, I guess, a little bit about the foster care program and what the members do there. I mean, do they actually help place people in foster homes? Do they vet the foster parents? Do they?
They assist the foster parents. Sometimes they have to move a child or children or a group of children from one foster home setting to another, or we have kids that may be in residential, kids that need an RTF or a little bit more. They may need a more hands-on type of need services for them, right. So they're in residential facilities, and they're not only on Long Island. They could be New York State. Sometimes they're out of state also, so they work with them also. So they're in communication with those facilities, and they'll make trips up there to see the kids there. Also, when the children are here in Suffolk County, they do go to the homes. They assist the foster home parents, the foster parents in the homes. What their needs are to assist the families to reunite and move forward.
Okay, yeah. So I would assume there'd be like some educational programs and stuff like that. But that sounds to me like there's probably two components to this job. People in an office environment, dealing with paperwork
in the
phone
computer,
calls, regulations, stuff like that. But then, people out in the field, are those groups kind of separated? Do you have a group that would, be considered like a field worker? So when you work...
If you're in the field, you have set days, or you try and have set days where you can sit down and get your paperwork done, get behind the computer, because there are so many regulations with the state and feds, with the federal government, that we have to keep up with, especially if children are in foster care. There's permanency hearings and moving forward, right?
I was in an odd position where I had to, through the work that I do for AME, to look at some of the state regulations. Yes. And one of the things that became readily apparent was they're not necessarily in a discernible order. Maybe the standing rule is at the top of the pile, or maybe it's 3/4 of the way in, or maybe it's filed attached to something that didn't seem like it was going to have the regulation in it, but it does. And so that it's not as simple as let's go to this master archive that clearly delineates this is the page the regulation you're looking for is on. I mean, there's a little bit of detective work involved in all of this also.
Yes, there is. And our regs are constantly changing. Our requirements for what we do, especially in the investigative stage, they're changing the requirements of what needs to complete an investigation. The list is getting longer and longer and longer. There's now the foster care candidacy regs that we have to keep on top with, that we have to monitor, and that's throughout the whole bureau. So they're constantly changing. So we have to adjust, and there's not enough time for us to adjust to do field work and to do the computer work and try and stay on top of everything that we need to do.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about staffing then, because now I'm getting a sense that maybe these divisions of this department don't have enough people at every single moment throughout the year to say, you know what, so-and-so is going to really need to find this reg to get through this case, and they're going to need a couple of hours to sift this pile.
Right.
So, let's pull somebody else in to, help pick up the slack. I mean, do you find in these divisions, you find that, maybe staffing can sometimes be, I mean, does it get to the point where, like, if somebody's sick or takes a vacation, everyone kind of feels it?
It depends. If you do have someone that goes out on medical and they're out long term, the rest of the group, the rest of the teammates have to pick up for that person and assume some of that caseload. There isn't that substitute on the sideline waiting for for that person to come in.
Right.
Yes, we could always use more people. We're constantly turning over through retirement or people moving on or finding different jobs and so on and so forth. Since I've been there 25 years.
Right.
I don't think we've ever been fully staffed.
This is emotionally intensive, this work. So
Yes.
I would imagine there's some people that also burn out.
Yes.
Are there standards in place now that say, okay, you can't have more than X amount of difficult cases or X amount, because I guess every case is kind of going to have a different workload?
No, there's not a set form. It's really up to the supervisor to try and feel out what a caseworker or what a particular worker can handle.
Right.
I was a caseworker, senior caseworker, now supervisor,
Right.
and you grasp all that and you can tell who can handle this at what moment,
Right.
who can't. But you never know. One day you may think you had given someone a simple case to handle or go out on or
It becomes
do whatever,
difficult.
and now you're in court. And that entails a lot of paperwork, a lot of
that just adds another layer, when you bring in the court
Yes.
side of things, so not just depositions, but maybe cross-examination.
right.
And if I know anything about the court system, it's probably not the incident occurred and 3 weeks later you're in front of everybody getting things done. You're probably a year away from the incident.
Sometimes it could extend to that long. It's really nothing gets settled immediately. You're in court within, I would say, if you're filing paperwork, you can be in the next day or 72 hours. You can be in court.
Right.
But it doesn't get settled. A lot of times there's temporary orders put in place, and you may not get a permanency order or a permanent order until possibly 6 months to a year down the road.
But you might be looking at someone that has to come in and give certain pertinent information. It's no longer fresh in their mind.
Right.
And that can happen at any point in time because
Yes.
that system functions at the pace it does, and your work functions at the pace it does.
Right.
So you would also kind of have to account for, trial prep.
Right. There's a lot of times you're taking your stuff home and you're relearning the case you had once before.
Uncompensated on your own time.
Yes.
That's not great.
No.
That's not great. And again, I think it illustrates one point. People doing this job, and predominantly people who work in government, they care about their community. They care about what they're doing. They care about the people that they represent, so much so that they're willing to do something like this.
Right.
But it's still, to me, it is an inequity.
Yeah.
To say, and again, you talk about yourself as a supervisor. And you
Right.
say, okay, well, I hope I have enough people in today to handle the stuff that we've got thrown at us.
Right.
These are human lives on the line, relying on this stuff that can't necessarily look out for themselves.
Right. And there have been times where when I first became a supervisor, I moved into different spots or different units where I had to go out in the field as a supervisor.
Mhm.
You have to do your job. This is what you're doing. This is what we do.
You can't let something like this
Right.
happen.
And that's part of it. And I can call them a unique group of people that work there, and they will take their work home. They will stay the extra 15 minutes to the half hour to the hour to get that because it's clear in their conscience to make themselves feel that, you know what, I did what I needed to do to move on to the next day.
Right. But from a work perspective, there's this, contract between employer and employee,
Right.
And it's trading time for money. That's all it comes down to. Everybody, to some extent, has some sort of job, except for a handful of people who were born with enough money that was invested so well that all they have to do with their time is watch their investments in the markets and whatever else. Everybody else works.
Right.
And to hear that there are government workers that have to, take work home, scramble to try and get by, where there aren't any standards in place that say, hey, if you work more than X amount of cases, the probability of something getting messed up and therefore a human life being affected,
Right.
a human life that can't defend itself,
Right.
that's a huge risk.
Yes.
That's a huge risk. I guess I say it far too often, I like people to know, I like the world to know when we're talking about the average government worker that works in AME and it's essential services across the board, across the county, we're not talking about people that are making crazy, amazing money where you'd say to yourself, like, yeah, of course. Oh, I would do that too. I'd work from home, no problem.
Right.
Average take-home salary, cash in hand, is about $45,000 a year.
Yeah.
$45,000 a year. There's no district in Suffolk County where that's a living wage.
Right.
It is below living wage. And in some instances, in some departments, and in some job titles, you're working these jobs and qualifying for the services that government provides for people who can't earn enough.
Right.
Or picking up secondary jobs or whatever else. And, in
Yes.
the case of your department, you don't want someone so overworked. The only way they can get by is working a secondary job somewhere.
Right.
They can't mess up on these cases. This is vitally important.
Yes. Very true.
Okay, so what are some of the other challenges you face?
Every day is a challenge because, especially in the investigative field, you never know what you're going to walk into when you walk up to a door and you knock on that door and
Right.
you're showing your identification, who you are, and you're not sure how the person you're talking to is going to react to you being at their door now.
Yeah. Now, when you say identification, I mean, is badge? I mean,
It's a plastic badge that swipes us into the building and also
Does
has
this-
their name and
does it
say
look like something you could make on a photocopier in your house, or does it? I mean, is
To
it
an extent, yes.
official? I mean, because I would
it's official, but it's something that possibly you could.
you could just
yeah.
doctor up at home.
Yeah.
I would be worried about the idea of someone reacting to who are you? What?
Right.
That's phony. You're just trying to
Right.
like someone could reasonably feel like they're defending their home and their family
Yes.
by not recognizing, the ID that's put. So
Right.
that adds a level right out of the
Yes.
gate. Just as you ring the doorbell, there is a level of what's going to happen here.
Right. You learn being on the job as you move along, but sometimes you get laxed when you do it. You think it out before you drive there. What's the possibilities of something that may happen? Where you're going to do? Where you're going to go? But if you get into a period where nothing's happened to you, you feel kind of invincible and you're out there,
Right.
and sometimes you don't expect it. There's been times where they say, make sure the door isn't locked behind you, walk into the house. And I was probably doing it for about 10 years at that point, and I always let the person walk in front of me to lead me to where they want to be comfortable in their house,
Right.
and somehow they lock the door behind me.
Right.
And that's 10 years on the job.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm going out and there's the door locked. So if something was ever to happen, now you're caught.
You're in a dangerous
Yeah.
situation,
Yes.
and you're not going in there with anything other than like you present this laminated piece of plastic.
You're going
that
in
says
there with the
you're
clipboard and
official,
a pen.
and maybe an attitude of I'm here
Right.
on behalf of the government, but
Right.
you're in a house that could have 3, 4, 5 adults in it.
Yes.
You're by
and-
yourself delivering
right.
maybe sometimes bad news.
Which is true. And you never know
Oof.
what's going on in the house. You can walk into a house where it's not even in the allegations, and you're walking into where it's they're dealing drugs from that home, or there's something else going on where you put yourself at risk.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazingly dangerous.
Yes.
And, you add to that level of not being sure what
Right.
the workload is. So what if you're let's put together this horrible scenario. You're on the job 10 years, and something slips your mind because everything's always been okay.
Right.
You don't realize the door's locked behind you.
Right.
There's drugs in the house. There's upset adults in the house.
Right.
And you've got this little piece of plastic that says, I promise you I'm here for the government on behalf of a child that's in this house.
Right.
If things go sideways, I mean, you don't even have any protection outside of,
No.
I mean, I think the law would frown on you trying to punch your way out of a house.
Right.
But you can't just
Do it.
stand there and take the beating either.
No.
Like, this is concerning.
You try and get out of the best as possible. You do what you need to do to get out of that situation. Still, your first job is to make sure that child or children that are in the house are safe. And then at that point, our job is they were accustomed to either calling supervisor or whoever's in charge and telling what the situation, calling the police and saying, this is what I have.
Right.
And, yeah.
See, I don't want to overstate the case. For me, it's a question of when, not a question of if, that things go bad.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, your guys are relatively safe out there. You get into some dangerous situations, but there's good training, there's good practices in place to kind of. But I know of a few incidents that didn't go well, and most recently, someone was actually convicted for beating up one of these caseworkers.
Yes.
And they are now a felon. They have time to serve. They will have lengthy probation. But you don't want it to happen,
That way.
ever.
Right.
And I don't think that's the worst possible case that could come out of something like this.
Right.
And again, a testament to the department and those people that make those decisions to try and put the most possible protections in place.
Right.
But I think more needs to be done here.
Yes.
And to talk about, bringing work home with you and not being sure if there's going to be enough people to cover the case. So you, as someone who's trying to supervise this operation, your function is to make sure that everybody's resources allocated the right way so no child falls through the cracks, so to speak. And then you say to yourself, well, the only way this work is getting done today and the people of Suffolk County are served is if I leave my desk and go out in the field to deal with stuff.
There's been times, yes.
That's concerning. It's concerning. And I think, something needs to be looked at there and thought about maybe differently. Again, when we talk about that physical take-home pay and that average salary, we're not, let's refer back to the county budget of $3.1 billion. Hiring a handful of caseworkers, not so they could sit around at their desk and tell stories and, talk about, their favorite restaurants, but to alleviate some of the pressures on the workload itself, so everybody's sharp and doing their job to the best of their ability, so that it allows for people to be sick and take vacations, which they've earned, and providing necessary backup sometimes. You may know in advance because of the neighborhood and what's on paper in front of you. I'm not going to send one person to this house. We need at least two people, and maybe we even need to, let somebody know before we go there so there's some sort of a standby response team in case things go sideways. Right.
Which is true. If we have a history with that area or that particular home or that particular address, yes, it's the worker that's been signed or that supervisor would know about something like that. Or if we had information leading up to that, we would send two workers or maybe ask for assistance from the police to accompany us to go out there, which we've done in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, how do you feel about morale over there? We've been talking about cases, and I guess that really comes down to the catchphrase, which is case loads. So how many different ways you might have to split your time and your mental energy in a day? How do you feel that's impacting morale?
Morale is very fragile. You can have good periods when the caseload cycle goes low, and then everybody feels good about themselves. And then all of a sudden, when the cases, you can say, when it hits the fan, and then morale will go low, or there's changes in policies or changes in what they're now required to do, and everybody doesn't like changes, and so they have a dip in the morale.
Yes.
We try our best. We have a good unit board over there. We try our best to get a lot of people involved, different events, to get them out, get them talking.
Yes. Yeah, there's something to be said for the camaraderie of everybody working together, especially in these dangerous situations.
Right.
And yes, people don't like change, but some change you probably shouldn't like.
Right.
You know, and you know, so a policy change that isn't reflected with proper staffing and compensation.
Right.
You know, I mean, if it was policy that you have to do certain things on your own time, like case prep, you know, that is, you know, or I should say trial prep, not case prep, but trial prep. That's not policy. People are just doing that because they know there isn't enough time to get it done otherwise, and they don't want to goof it up. You know,
Sure.
Their lives are on the line.
Right. Plus, we're representing the county when we take the stand.
Yeah.
We have our badge. We're wearing a badge, representing the county, representing our job. We want to present what we've done, and that's the best we've done.
Sure. Oh, you know, I mean, I guess that's another aspect of all of this
Right.
is the liability to the county, and that liability to the county ultimately becomes the liability to the
worker.
taxpayer.
And to
Right.
the worker.
Yeah, well, to the worker and the taxpayer. So if someone's overworked, didn't have the ability to do the case prep or the trial prep, I keep saying the wrong thing, and something goes wrong on the stand and there is an unfavorable outcome, sometimes those unfavorable outcomes come with a dollar amount, and that dollar amount has got to come from somewhere.
Right.
So, you know, it's a question of risk management also.
Yes.
At what point in time do you deplete the workforce and make it so that you are an easy target for outside forces to say, you, the government, didn't do your job?
Right. You can't.
Right. So, have you felt like the county's trying to make any progress on the issue? Caseloads, safety, you know, generally just getting things done in family services.
I know there's been questions in the past. There's been committees put together about the caseloads and establishing should there be a caseload cutoff for per worker, or should you have so many workers in the unit or in the agency to cover what the needs are and what the demands are.
Sure.
And it's like we had mentioned before, it's ever changing. The world is ever changing. You went from your crack epidemics to your opioid epidemics to everything else, and it's going to change, it's going to continue to change. The next epidemic, and it's going to explode.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you find that the economy has an effect? Like,
Yes.
So when the economic downturn happens,
Yes.
caseloads go up.
You can see your correlation with that.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, it's a good thing everything's great with the economy right now, right?
Yeah.
It's a little sarcasm for our listeners. So, for my part in this whole process, I do a lot of different things, but one of the things I do is I try to speak to the legislators in Suffolk County and make them aware of some of the things that we're talking about today. And one legislator in particular, Legislator Hahn, has really made it a priority to learn about this and try and figure out if there is some way to make some improvement to the way things are being done now,
Right.
for the betterment of not just the workers, but also the people who receive these services from Suffolk County. And you know, I do have to say, I always appreciate when dealing with somebody in a position to make these decisions that they take the time to listen and understand. You know when someone is just patiently waiting for you to stop talking so they can go on to their next thing,
Right.
and when someone really wants to engage and get into an issue. And Legislator Hahn has been absolutely terrific with this.
That's good to hear.
So, you know, if you had to say, you know, a number one shift in the way things are now to the way forward, to a better, safer path, what would you say, one of those priorities might be for?
Would be automatic backfill of workers. They're like we had mentioned before, turnovers as far as retirement, turnovers because people got new jobs, the burnout, people just can't deal with the pressure that comes along with the job.
So if somebody leaves, they aren't automatically replaced?
No.
How long might you have to wait?
I don't have the exact numbers,
Right.
but it's not automatic. Yeah.
So,
I wish it would be.
Couple of weeks till you find an applicant? Months? Is it...
They have a skin process that goes throughout the county, and
Right.
the approval, they submit it. I'm not sure along the process and who sees it first. Does it go to personnel, payroll, then to the exec's
We'll
office?
be talking months.
Yeah.
In the heart of the busiest season with an economic downturn and a big push in the drug sales market,
Right.
Again, I'm painting a worst case
No,
scenario,
I hear you. But we've been there as an agency. We've been in that situation where there was a grand jury hearings that we had,
Right.
and they reviewed cases that we did, and the legislator asked for corrective actions. One of them was to fill these spots and to do it.
So I would almost assume, though, just I guess maybe going down the rabbit hole, your staffing is where it is now, and the caseloads are where it is at now.
Right.
If next year, God forbid, the caseload doubles, automatic backfill is in place, but there isn't any standard for how many cases somebody can handle,
Right.
they could backfill those positions, and you guys will still be hopelessly. So to some extent, you've got to find some criteria, even if
Right.
it's just reporting, even if it's just to say, hey, just so everyone knows, the average caseload is above
Right.
this recommended level.
There
by
would have
X
to be
amount.
right. There would have to be some mechanism in place to say, all right, our caseloads have reached this over the last couple of months. Our staffing is here, and our cases are the caseload per. There needs to be, all right, we're going to expand it, or.
And for those at home that couldn't see what Chris was doing, he had one hand up high and another hand down low. So caseload high, hand high,
Sorry.
staffing low, hand low. No, it's just
Right.
an observation. But just getting back on track, it's not always easy to fix these problems.
No.
But if you don't start having the conversations, if you and I weren't here talking about this, many of the people that are listening at home, they're probably not aware of this situation and how this department impacts the community
Right.
and the challenges that they're facing.
Right.
And also, if we don't have the conversation with those people who can make effective rule changes to fix this problem, then that's kind of on us also. So I
Right.
think it's very important to at least have the dialogue and say,
Oh, definitely.
this is the critical function, this
Right.
is where the deficiency is, and let's talk about how we can get there. So is there anything that I didn't touch on that you just might want the world to know? Any phone number? You're talking about foster care. You're talking about a couple of different things there, and then maybe there's a situation where
If there are families out there that are in need, where they hit rough times and they need assistance with maybe now they need medical insurance and Medicaid or SSI or SSD or something traumatic has happened to their family, they can call 631-854-9359. That's our preventive services intake, and we can hear what's going on with them, see what services that they'll need, and set them up with that.
it's awesome. And again, at the end of the day, getting that number out there is important because people need to have access to these services, especially those qualified people in need. But you're adding to the workload.
Yes.
We just added to the workload.
Yes.
And I did that just to show that you have no hesitation.
No.
First and foremost, it's about the people in the communities that you're trying to help.
Yep.
And it isn't about being overworked, and it isn't about making this tremendous salary or anything else. And I think that's important for people to hear and understand.
Right.
Chris, I want to thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
And to our listeners, we'll see you again next week.